Lucas. So today we're going to have a special guest on. He's just running a minute late, but we can set up a few of the things that we were going to talk about. I'm down here at at a convention. So there's a variety of these that happen throughout the U.S. on various days. So this one's actually a horror con that's happening in Kansas City. So he does some horror comics, and so I thought it'd be fun to have a chance to talk with the creator of Death. So this is a project that's near and dear to my heart because it's my brother that does the comics. So we'll have a good conversation. I know, Rusty, you got a lot of ties into the comic book and NFT industry, right? I think you were mentioning that you work with Doug TenNapel. Is that right?
Yes, I worked with Doug TenNapel when he was doing NFTs. He's kind of fallen out of the NFT business, but when he was doing his NFTs, I helped him run all of his projects, and I still keep in touch with him, in touch with him when it comes to NFTs. And I also help out with another person named Mike Miller, who's very prominent in the comic book world.
So what are some of the books that Mike Miller does?
Mike Miller, he's majorly famous for the Injustice. I don't know if you've seen that. That's the one where Superman punches the hole through Joker's heart and kills him, and it's the whole fight versus Batman and Superman. He was the main artist for that entire. That was his baby. Like that's his artwork. He's a 30-year Marvel and DC comic book artist, and he's worked in pretty much all of the superhero comics you can think of. He did all the GI Joes. He's done pretty much every single X-Men. He's done Superman. He's done Batman. He's one of the major names when it comes to comic books.
And you're routinely interacting with this guy. That's kind of the thing. What do you do with him particularly? Did Mike make
when I first got into NFTs, I've always been a fan of Mike Miller through his work in comic books throughout the years. I was a fan of his. And when I first started NFTs, my very first project was a cryptocurrency called Starship. And I invested into that cryptocurrency. And Mike Miller was actually the artist for the Starship NFTs. And so Mike Miller got into it because BitBoy was getting really big at the time. This is back right in the prime of NFTs, 2020, 2021. BitBoy was really big. He was getting a really big name. And so Mike Miller sought out BitBoy to do his NFT artist work. And so Mike Miller became the artist for BitBoy. And then I was watching and paying attention to BitBoy. And so I started buying some of Mike Miller's art that way. And then right after BitBoy's collection came out, Mike Miller started his own collection and his own NFT project. And ever since then, I have been a moderator and helped Mike Miller with, I wouldn't say I've been on the team level of any of his projects, but I've been a moderator and I've communicated with him in the NFT world for about 3 years now.
Grant, do you see the second paragraph here on Mike S. Miller's career?
No, I was trying to find the NFT collection, but now I'm seeing he's working on the Hedge Knight. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, he was the artist for George R.R. Martin also, and all of the Game of Thrones graphic novels. And the Hedge Knight is his art that's getting put into a new show on HBO now that he's bragging about and talking about on some of his YouTube videos and his NFT projects. He's actually going to tie an NFT project to that because he got the rights to do the art from them. And he's also, I remember some of the times I like to watch some of his streams he does on YouTube because he'll do live art sales and he'll sell off pieces of his live art that he's done throughout the years. And I remember seeing there was a 2-page piece work that was a Game of Thrones cover that I just absolutely loved. And I wish I could have bought it, but he wanted, I think, $2,500 for that piece.
And then this is the other guy that you're routinely working with, Doug TenNapel.
Yeah, Doug TenNapel was the creator of Earthworm Jim. Above and beyond Earthworm Jim, he created the Neverhood, Bigfoot Bill. He's probably got 20 different graphic novels, comics, books that are out there. He's created a number of video games. Doug TenNapel is the one that I own all this, the wallet control for all of his NFTs. And if you look at my NFT profile right now, it is actually adopted kind of off of the Doug TenNapel art because of how in depth I've done and helped him with his NFT career.
So who is the artist that did Azuki Apes? I know that that's been talked about at least a little bit, but I don't recall. Like it wasn't Doug TenNapel that did the Azuki Apes. That was somebody else, right?
Yeah, it's somebody else that did the art for the Azuki Apes. I do not know the artist for the Azuki Apes. I have not gotten into that quite high of the hierarchy of the interior group. I think there's only like 2 or 3 people that actually know the artist for the Azuki Apes. We keep it very secretive because that artist lives in Japan, and he is an actual artist that has prominent work in Japan. And we don't want to expose his name and damage his reputation in Japan because they see it currently as a different form of entertainment with NFTs, and he doesn't want to link his work with actual animation and comic book or animation and artwork to the NFTs in his country.
You
So
know,
out of that, we respect him, and we don't release his name. And I currently don't even know who he is.
that's actually a very interesting thing because if you look at what's happened with NFTs, there have been a lot of art that's been produced and put on the chain. As far as you can put it on the chain, because we've kind of talked about this with respect to metadata and a variety of different things. It's how durable is the data, and I don't necessarily want to get into the technical aspects of it, but it seemed kind of strange to me that we haven't seen some flood into the NFT space by traditional artists, whether it be fine artists or comic book artists or whatever. So last year I had a chance to be at San Diego Comic-Con and I kind of made the rounds. I got a chance to kind of just be an attendee, but then I also was very interested in NFT art and kind of where this might go, especially since, at Evergreen, we were making trading cards. And I thought, well, this is kind of neat. And I was looking to see if anybody else that was already in the industry was doing it. And I actually did find that DC Comics was doing NFT style trading cards. So they had, their characters on it. So DC was fully doing it. And so the person who was in charge of doing their trading cards and the NFT tie-in, she was there, and I was talking to her about how we were doing it on Chia, and she was really intrigued by what was possible and like what we were doing and some of the technical aspects of it. And so we had a good shop talk about it. But I also had a chance to sort of ask a bunch of artists that were traditional comic book artists if they had interest in NFTs and if they were working on it. And the reaction that I got was similar to what your artist in Japan had said, which is, I'm not sure this is for me. I don't know if this is the right time to be getting into it. I don't know if this is going to sully my reputation or if it's going to impinge upon other stuff that I'm already doing, along with a lot of concerns about licensing, like whether you could actually protect the art the way that you could do in more traditional copyright or, publishing. And so there was a lot of hesitation about it. And that's kind of, it's interesting that you have had that reaction from the artist that did Azuki Apes that's saying, hey, I've got an established career and I'm doing this and I'm not sure that I want to, be involved in this NFT stuff.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that point of view, especially from the artists and people that I've interacted with within the space. There's probably 5 or 6 different comic book artists that I've tried to help buy some of their artwork as they still help to try to make collections. One thing that Mike Miller liked to do when he established his collection, it was called the Funky Monkey Frat House, was he wanted to be an artist incubator. He wanted to get all of his friends from the company and the business that he's worked for together to try to create NFTs and work and make projects and try to be their opening into the NFT marketplace because he was such a big name. He was getting so much work that he couldn't do it all. And so he would get a project pitch from somebody and be like, hey, I don't have time to do this project, but I know somebody over here who has done this work and this work or this work. And I think that they would be worthy of this project, and they would introduce them and get his friends jobs. And there was a lot of different projects that I tried to get into because they were just friends of Mike Miller, or I wanted to support them and I just wanted to be a part of it. And a lot of those projects never really went very far because, these are artists. They're very good at their skill at what they do, but an NFT is kind of like a business. And it's a hard thing to really make an NFT always profitable. And with a community and an NFT project, that's what everybody always wants. Is they always just pretty much want the NFT to be profitable for them to sell to the next person, and that's hard to force upon an artist. That was one of the big things that Doug TenNapel had a problem with. Is he created a whole bunch of really great art, but he couldn't force the price upon the public and make people want to pay that every single time.
All right, hey, well, we've got Spanky joining us on stage here. So, Spanky, we've just been talking a little bit with Rusty about his ties into the industry, and so he's been working with Mike Miller and Doug TenNapel. So, kind of some interesting stuff that we touched on a bit before you had a chance to join us. So, you're here at Crypticon. This is the horror comic show down in Kansas City. And the tie-in to the horror angle, I guess, is the Of Death horror comic that you created. And what you've got a 10-foot death puppet that people can come pose by, right?
Yep, that is true. We are here at Crypticon, and Data Red Comics is celebrating its 25th anniversary, and we do have a large, giant, like armature puppet that people can come and cosplay with.
So, Lucas, have you ever had a chance to pose in front of a puppet yet?
No, I've never I've never attended a Comic-Con, any of them. So
this one's actually got a few of the big directors from back in the day. I think Joe Dante is the keynote guy here who did Gremlins and The Burbs. I'll have to pull that one up.
Yeah, that is definitely correct.
you mean the movie Gremlins, like from the late 80s? Cheeseburgers, no bones?
Yeah, the very same.
That was a good one. Hi, Spanky. Welcome to the show. What is it? What is I mean, can you tell us about Of Death? I know Grant probably knows a lot about it. What's sort of the concept behind Of Death?
Wait, here, hold on. Before we move on to that,
Okay.
so see, there's Joe Dante right there. So that's his MO. So he's going to be doing the keynote. So the dude that did Gremlins and The Burbs, like this guy, and then there's some other B-listers here, but like this one's probably going to be pretty fun to hear him talk about, his work on Gremlins for sure. But yeah, let's talk about Of Death.
Sure. So, Of Death is my newest comic book for Data Red Comics. It's a modern retell of the Frankenstein myth, where the teenage girl is the Frankenstein monster, and she is sent back to school and chased around by a giant like Grim Reaper Cthulhu, known as the Dark Pope.
There's the cover for issue number 1 right there.
And are you the artist, Spanky?
So I am the writer, the inker, and the producer. The actual like person who did the pencils is Chaz Truog, who drew Animal Man for Grant Morrison, and Chaz did the first issue and a half of the comic book.
And you said it's a riff on Frankenstein, like crossed with Cthulhu.
Yep, exactly. So like the mad scientist, his daughter dies and he brings her back to life and sends her to high school.
And then does she have? Is this sort of like the angst of high school? Is that what it leads into? What drives it?
Yep, exactly. So it's kind of a like a teenage horror, but also like a teen romance comedy. So she goes through all the times and trials of going to high school, and then the story also hits kind of all the major points of Frankenstein, but with just kind of all kind of new guts and tentacles.
I'm always I'm always curious, like what sort of door horror is opening for the experience of a reader. So
Kind of a what's new under the sun, kind of like what does yours have that most people don't? Or
Well, it's also, yeah, I mean, I'm not a writer, but I read a lot. I'm not a doctor, but
Well, Lucas, what sort of horror do you read though? Do you read Lovecraft? Is that like I don't imagine that like with your vocabulary and the way that you read that might be up your alley, but maybe it's too boring. I don't know.
well, I mean, I love fantasy. Probably my favorite fantasy series, apart from Robert Jordan, which you know you could look at Robert Jordan as a post-apocalyptic horror show, a post-nuclear Russia United States horror show played out in North Africa, Night Watch, Day Watch, and Twilight Watch, Final Watch. I don't know if you guys have ever read Sergei Leondenko Russian series, and it's about vampires. But I also, you know, I read like the horror series on Jane Austen. I always think that as a I don't know, a literary, you know, like a literary trope, like horror and fantasy both are like talking about the present, and they're also trying to open up doors for conversations that people don't want to necessarily have about reality.
This would definitely be the doctor in and of itself not dealing with reality and like all the problems that he opens up, you know, with the bringing back the dead.
Well, you know, I'm also fascinated with these concepts of the dead. I get a lot into you know, Maya, Aztec, chi concepts of I don't know, social order. And to me also, when we have a discussion about death, it can also be about, you know, what brings people together, conflict resolution. So and even I mean, when I read a book about vampires, say, I'm often thinking about like in terms of sexual repression. When I this can all vary, but I don't know. So do you think about it in terms of that? Like any is it a metaphor? Is it a metaphor for some sort of issue that is prescient to you?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
Lucas, you're trying to make it too metaphysical. It's comic books, man. Like it's a good story. It's good art.
I mean, okay.
It's awesome. How long is the average comic, and how many volumes do you have? How many issues have you brought into the storyline?
Sure. So I'm on issue number 2 is out, and I'm currently working on 3 and 4 in kind of unison. And I think that when I originally wrote it, you know, I obviously wrote it kind of like as a movie or TV script, and this is kind of the easiest way to make a movie. And so I think it's going to go about 7 issues.
Nice, nice. So it's kind of near the beginning. How long is each issue? And you're talking about kind of being inspired by movie. Have you ever done any animation work?
Oh, I've done a ton of animation work. On my website, spacesheriff.com, there are multiple animations, you know, traditional, stop motion, and then kind of a mix of real life and stuff like that. So yeah, and a video game.
That was your original training, right? Like you're trained to be an animator, right?
Yeah, I went to school for animation and interactive multimedia.
Nice, very cool, very cool to learn that that's how you got your interest into it, and kind of your step into the business. And I really like, you know, kind of the theme of horror comics, and I'm not necessarily the of Death and Frankenstein just specific story, but just the overall kind of just the way you can have your artistic expression with the characters, and you're allowed to be, you know, over the top and a little bit more goofier with the way you express some of the scenes. And I was looking through a little when Grant was doing a quick flow of some of your pages of the book, that some of that, you know, kind of comes into play. And I wonder, how do you enjoy that more, or do you like to be more traditional in your style?
I kind of like to be more traditional in my style, but this definitely has like an anime feel to it. Like when I wrote it, I was like, it's like, yeah, this kind of is going to be kind of anime-ish, where it's going to have elements where you're just going to be like, what is going on with this? And, you know, kind of elements like that.
And there, he's done a variety of different stuff like over time. I think what is it? One of your most popular books is this one. So it's big anime robots, cats and dogs. This one routinely sells out like every time Spanky's at a show. That almost to a T, every one of these books will sell out. So this one's very common and it's very popular as far as when he goes to non horror shows. I imagine a lot of people will pick this one up even today. But I think at the last show he was at, he brought a bunch of these books with, and every single one of them sold. So this is a very popular one. This one, Rusty, if you've got the industry connections, we need to make this into a cartoon show. I mean, come on, this would be awesome. Like, we need the new Voltron for this day and age.
Oh yeah. That definitely looks really cool, and it ties me back to thinking about Brian Shearer. He was the artist around Transformers, and then Doug TenNapel, the one that we were talking about earlier with Earthworm Jim. He did a lot of big robot artwork within his comics and his games. That I see a lot of the kind of the same picturesque style here with his Robocatz here, and this is a really cool one. I like that he's got more on the genre than just horror, and I like that he's got comics books that are kind of geared towards kids and a younger generation and younger viewers, and that's one thing I really admire about people is if you can make a really good comic for kids nowadays. A lot of days nowadays there's a lot of stuff coming out that I would consider filth or not very worthy of comics, and I would say the golden age of comics was definitely in the past, but I do love to see people making really good comics, and this one looks like one I need to research some more about.
Yeah, I definitely like to jump around and do as many different genres as possible, kind of outside of superheroes. Like, I don't do a lot of superhero books. So it's like anything I can kind of come up with, that's kind of what I go with.
And I was going to ask, you mentioned
this is probably the closest thing you did to a superhero, right? Is the Space Sheriff one, and this was what probably the earliest book you ever did was Space Sheriff. That was the first one, right? That's why we got.
Yeah, this is the book I started out with in 1999. That's gone through like a whole ton of iterations for the first book, and this is also the game that I did a full video game for. That's kind of it's a point and click, like the old LucasArts games, like Sam and Max, or even like the Sierra games, like Leisure Suit Larry.
I love Leisure Suit Larry. I have a model of him up on my shelf. That was one of the games I remember from back when I was a kid.
Yeah, 25 years of comics at Data Red. So it's been video games, animations, comic books, just like a plethora of stuff. Plus, he's constantly hitting the con circuit. So frequently has a booth. And like I said, we were at San Diego Comic-Con. That's one of the biggest cons. I think isn't it the biggest con? And he can routinely get a table there because has done the show multiple times. So yeah, he's well known to the folks out in San Diego.
Yeah, that's where I actually went to go meet Doug TenNapel, was the San Diego Comic-Con. It was during the COVID years, though, so we didn't actually go into the Comic-Con because they're forcing everybody to wear a mask. And good old Doug, his beliefs, he wouldn't wear a mask inside the Comic-Con. So even though he was given free tickets, he wouldn't go in. And then I think Mike Miller was not showing up to that Comic-Con also. But yeah, that's one of the biggest Comic-Cons. And I was going to ask your brother, how long has he been doing the Comic-Con, different jumping around to shows, and how many he's done, and some of his more memorable moments at some of these Comic-Cons and people that he might have met through the industry.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like I rode in an elevator with Bryan Cranston once, and Carrie Fisher stopped by the booth one time, and I just missed meeting Matt Groening at one of the San Diego Comic-Cons, and I've also met Buzz from the Melvins at one of the Comic-Cons. So there's all kinds of just like crazy random famous people wandering around the comic book shows.
What was Carrie Fisher like?
She just stopped by very, very quickly, and I didn't, want to make any sudden movements,
You didn't want to twist her bun.
Exactly. It's just like, oh, it's Carrie Fisher. Just like let her shop and kind of, like not get all fanboy on her. It's like, oh my God, I love Star Wars. Let's talk about Princess Leia.
Yeah, in case anybody doesn't know who we're talking about, this Princess Leia stops by Spanky's booth to browse the books. That's that's pretty wild. That's a great story.
Yeah, casual, no big deal. Just Princess Leia.
Oh, you know.
And you said Bryan Cranston too. What about Bryan Cranston?
I was a very late ad to one of the San Diego Comic-Cons, and I was like, well, I don't have a hotel, and they're just like, well, we'll put you in the Omni, and Omni was where all the stars were staying. So like, I think not True Blood, but the vampire one with Suki in it.
Twilight. No, yeah. Which one was that? I thought you were going to talk about that it was the Twilight era, but that was True Blood, right? True Blood was Suki Stackhouse.
Yeah, is that True Blood? Okay. But yeah, like all the super famous people were standing there. I was like, all right, well, I guess I can stay at the Omni. And then, one day I was like riding down the elevator and there was Bryan Cranston. And like, there was like, we were just kind of standing there, like not really saying anything. And he just turned to me and there was like a piece of bread on the ground. He's like, bread. And I was like, yeah.
And Lucas, you know who Bryan Cranston is. That's Malcolm in the Middle. That's Breaking Bad.
I mean, I know who he is. I couldn't pull it up off the top of my head. Yeah, Breaking Bad. But you mentioned somebody else too that you ran into. But I don't know. I need to go fanboying off on all these stars. I've never gone to a Comic-Con. I used to. The closest that I've got was stalking George R.R. Martin in Santa Fe.
Well, Lucas, I'll tell you, like that's be one of the things that you have to put on your bucket list. You gotta make it at least one con, because if nothing else, it's fun to just kind of walk around. And the San Diego one is absolutely fascinating because it has some of the biggest set pieces that you'll ever see. I mean, I'm talking 20 feet high, some 40 feet high pieces that are constructed inside this area. And I shot a bunch of video for it because I was pretty much gobsmacked by the amount of effort, money that's put into, the showcasing of the various pieces of art. And like the One Piece one was just fascinating. Had big interactive multimedia screens. They had life-size characters of all the One Piece folks. I mean, it was fascinating. Like really, really cool pieces. So if you ever really want to experience something neat, you got to at least book a day at San Diego Comic-Con.
I used to follow George R.R. Martin's blog, and he talked a lot about going to the Comic-Cons, maybe even before they really blew up, because it used to be something that a smaller contingent of society felt comfortable dressing up in strange outfits and going out in public. But are you familiar with Meow Wolf, Spanky or Grant or Rusty?
I've heard the name, but I don't know exactly what it is.
And because we were talking about.
Wait, say it again. It's Meow Wolf.
Meow Wolf.
Yeah. Like what the noise that a cat makes.
Meow. Yes. Meow Wolf.
Yeah. And not to be confused with Actual Wolf, the country and western singer.
Or maybe to be confused with Wolf, the country singer. No, maybe Grant. I'm surprised y'all aren't familiar with it because it's sort of maybe like when you come to NFTs, when you come to Comic-Con,
is it this? Did I get the right one?
That's it. An immersive experience. George R.R. Martin bought the old bowling alley in Santa Fe several years ago, and they're a chain. Now they have a couple of them, although I've only ever been to the Santa Fe one. But what they do is, buy a big building and make this sort of fantastical 3D world. And the artists who are commissioned to be a part of it are constantly changing out their sets. The first time I went to Meow Wolf, you could do like you open a refrigerator door and walk through this like space portal, and it branches off in various ways. And in one of them, you came out in a school bus that was hurtling through a space time, and and you would like pop out and back into this house that was, I don't know, it's too much to, but it was like living in some sort of fantastical comic book, and an incredibly immersive and a beautiful experience. You know, like one room that you walked through, or with everything else, like had all these lasers projected through it. It was totally dark, and you walked through the lasers, and every laser beam that you broke was keyed to a musical tone, and so you walked through all of these lasers, and it played music. In another room, like you would touch the bones of a whale skeleton that you're walking through, and they were keyed to. I play like drums. It was like a big drum set room. All sorts of fun concepts like that. And you know, you're talking like when we talk about I don't know, the possibility of NFTs or blockchains, proof of ownership for binding, for I don't know, like both like having some sort of value passing around an artist concept and whatnot. In one way, I think about Meow Wolf and
I think the closest thing to something like Meow Wolf that I would have been at would be you know, like NFT Miami. I was actually had a chance to attend this. There was quite a bit that was going on there. The thing that I was kind of bummed about that happened here was this rise of the AI art, and this was, I would say, probably peak AI art that was happening during the time when I got a chance to see it. And I thought it was unfortunate because like a lot of the art sort of had this look to it that had a similarity, like a sameness to it, and then a lot of like just disjointed pixelization and kind of weirdness to it that I don't know if that was being embraced or whatnot, but like that's the closest thing I can think of to Meow Wolf that I've ever attended. So no, I haven't had a chance, probably just because it's not near me in any of the cities that they've got at Meow Wolf. So yeah, unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to check this out yet, but it looks fun. Next time I'm in any of these cities, I'll have to stop by, see if I get a chance. I'm usually in LA, so maybe that'd be the easiest one for me.
Oh, I bet the LA one is pretty awesome. I just think it's a pretty interesting, I don't know, immersive fair. It's you know, riffing on the old World's Fair, Chicago Fair, Comic Cons, like having a place for artists, a place of arts. It's also the new museum. I don't know, Spanky. What do you think of the concept of if you know, like tying one of your comic books into a real world that people could walk into, that like share some sort of storyline where people bounce into other rooms? Because like when I went to the Santa Fe narrative, you're actually trying to solve some sort of disappearance. Like you'd walk into this real world house and into these fantastical realms looking for the family that had disappeared and trying to solve that.
Yeah, sure. I always think about the displays. Like my regular gig is trade show marketing, so like creating booths and immersive like spaces for, you know, people at these comic book shows. I mean, one of my biggest dreams in life would be to have the giant mech dog robot be like, you know, 15, 20, 30 feet tall, that people have to like walk around like this big giant robot, and like doing it as an inflatable, or who knows what I could do.
Well, you did get a chance to 3D print one of the Robocatz and Thunderdogs, right? That was actually pretty neat to see that come into life. Like be able to rapid prototype out the idea of this mech and then make it into a plastic toy with you know, modern technology. I'll have to pull up one of the images of that.
Yeah, and then, you know, just doing the 3D models like that, that was very integral into actually drawing the mech robots in the book. So I could have this 3D model that I could reference and make sure that when I was doing all these different angles in the book, that I was doing them correctly and that everything would like look good and in proportion. Like I don't know how those old like anime guys like on Battleship Yamamoto did it with like the fly throughs of these giant like robots and ships, and who knows how they did all that.
Yeah, I love listening to Doug TenNapel talk about some of the old work that he did on some of the video games, and he did one that is kind of a lot like that. It's called the Neverhood. I don't know if any of you guys ever kind of saw that one. It was more explored around the world and like Russia and European countries more, but it was a point and click game that was clay motion, and so everything was like clay animated, and like had the way they had to like create all the different sets and the different like robot figures and stuff like that. He would go through talking about some of that and some of the documentaries that he does. And it just always just marveled and admired in some of the hard work and effort that people go into with these miniatures and just trying to move them just a little bit here or there to make the effect of almost full of complete smoothlessness and flowlessness.
Didn't they do an Earthworm Jim kind of like that too, where it was all like claymation, but it was all in a video game?
Yeah, Skull Monkeys was kind of a little bit more of that like style, that like artwork, and into a video game. That kind of like it was a mixture between like the Earthworm Jim and the Neverhood. Skull Monkeys was the video game that was kind of like that.
Grant, earlier you said that you walked around in the San Diego Comic-Con and were having a discussion about artists with why they were not embracing NFTs. Could you dig into some of what you discovered there?
Yeah, 1 second. I wanted to pull up the I want to pull up the mech robot, the printed one. So this is the when Spanky was talking about this and saying that it was used as a visual aid, because if you think about how you got to draw this as a comic, you've got to be able to hold some kind of a 3D model in your head to be able to say, well, I want to draw it from this angle or from the front view or whatever, and to try to do that, just hold it in your brain, like that's something. But so you use the model to actually try to help you get it into the right orientation. Is that what you're talking about, Spanky?
Yep, for sure.
So this is the actual 3D printed. It's like a little toy that is available, and he walks it to the show. So like this is kind of, I think, pretty impressive ability in our modern world to be able to take an idea that you've got, model it in the computer, and then 3D print it, and then have it on the desk. That is something that is just absolutely cutting edge technology that 10 years ago you would not have been able to do, but now in this modern world you can do it. And we actually used that a lot at Evergreen when we were first coming up with the cases and the ability to make the consumer electronic device that we did, because we needed to have a whole bunch of stuff inside. And so we went through a long prototyping phase where we made different case sizes and what have you. So that was used to great effect by Evergreen and also by Data Red to help make the comic book. So 3D printing, it has a lot more utility than anybody can possibly imagine. It's used ubiquitously in a lot of industries you might not even think about.
Oh yeah, these 3D printers are amazing nowadays. They're so cool what people can create with them. And that's one of the things that me and the co-founder of the wallet control for Doug TenNapel, I was mentioning kind of in our back talks. That's how me and him kind of met together and started talking. He was kind of an animator, a designer, and he would do 3D printing, and he wanted to do a 3D Earthworm Jim print that we tried to get together, and that was some fun work.
So, Lucas, to answer your question about my thoughts on NFTs and like what my experiences were. So when I was at Comic-Con, this was during the era when we were creating our cards, and I think it is a really cool experience, right? Like whenever I use blockchain, I always try to have some utility to it. And so when we made the cards for Evergreen, these were physical cards that actually embedded an offer file with an NFT. So you could scan the card, you could claim the NFT, and then the NFT allowed you to do something. It allowed you to set the background in the wallet. So it allowed you to skin the wallet, which was pretty cool. So going through that entire experience of creating an NFT and sort of living in the world of how do you create one of these and how do you do it on the Chia network. When I was at San Diego, I I had a chance to walk around, see what everybody was doing, and DC was doing their NFT trading cards, and so I got a chance to chat with those guys about how they were doing it, and it was fun to talk shop about how they implemented their NFTs, how they did their stuff, and how straightforward it was to do it on Chia. But the other thing that I had a chance to talk with the artists about was saying, hey, in the NFT world, we've got sort of really derivative machine generated art, but we aren't seeing as much artists embracing, NFT model of like how they can actually use this to further either the reach of their art or to just do art for art's sake on the blockchain. And there was a lot of hesitation, I think, from artists that I spoke to, that they seemed to think that this was not either the right time or that the technology wasn't, sufficiently advanced to where they wanted to do it. Right. It seemed like there was still difficulty, friction to actually getting stuff onto the chain the way they wanted it. And then there were concerns about licensing, royalties, and a variety of other things that it was like, this is all just too complicated. I'm a comic book artist. Like, I just want to make comic books. I'm not sure I want to foray into this world. And the people who had a little bit more savvy to it said, it just doesn't seem like it's the culture that I want to be birthed into. Whatever's happening there, it's a lot of machine generated derivative art, and I'm interested in making stuff that I think is interesting and cool. And so, how do you actually find the right project that allows you to have an intersection between the two that is interesting? And I think that was the reaction that I got almost overwhelmingly from most of the artists that I spoke to, and even some that were interested in doing a project. Some of them had expressed that they had difficulties just wrapping their head around how the technology would work and how they'd get it loaded in. So I think we're still in the early days of making it easy enough that you can get things published. The rest of the industry has some maturity in there, but as far as NFTs go, it's still a little bit of techno wizardry that you got to do to actually get it right and get it loaded on the chain and make it available to people.
And did you talk to them about, the novelness of offers and baked in royalties in Chia? Because I could certainly there's going to be a lot of artists who want to stick to the traditional medium, but for those who are looking for, I don't know. I just when I think about comic books and like limited runs, using blockchain and an NFT collection that gives them baked in royalties, that has an after market that is not bound to some website somewhere. Somebody, I would imagine, might be looking to make that jump. Spanky, what do you think about it?
I think I kind of fall into the categories with everybody else. I haven't done really anything with NFTs. I mean, it's kind of a little bit more pinup work, and I'm more of a storyteller. So I don't know exactly quite how it would translate for my work to an NFT.
Rusty, what's been, I don't know, your experience with Doug and Mike?
Well, Mike's trying to do something like that right now. I was gonna kind of jump in on it and mention it. He's doing a project like that right now. It's kind of one of his newer projects that he's working on. It's tied to his Pepe Trump token. It's a KEX on ETH, KEKS. And what they're doing is they're making an NFT collection. They have the token on ETH. They've bridged it to Base, and so now they're working on Base, and they're creating a comic book collection of NFTs where each of the panels is an individual NFT, and they're going to release each page as a separate collection. So all together, they tie together being one big comic book, like made into a collection on NFTs. I'm not sure how it's going to work out. I'm interested to watch it and see how he does it and see if it's very successful. I'm supporting him in doing it, and I'm helping where I can, and I'm watching what they do. And there was another one that I was involved in called the Cyber Hornets. And the Cyber Hornets, I think it was about 2.5 years ago, they did a full-on comic book for their NFT collection, where if you bought certain NFTs, you could get access to the comic book, and they would send out the comic book. And it was actually one of Mike Miller's friends that did the artwork for that.
It was like a physical tie-in. You bought the NFT and then you got a physical piece as a result of buying the NFT.
Yeah. Yeah, you bought the NFT, and then they did a physical comic book afterwards about the NFT collection that kind of revolved around the NFT characters, and then they allowed that for the people to get. And I think you had to have the NFT to get the comic.
So, Rusty, when we were talking about the difference between pinup art and storytelling art, did you say that Mike was trying to do something that was more storytelling based on NFTs? Like he's trying to like get away from the PFP thing? Is that the crux of his next project that he's trying to do on
Not
NFT?
so much that he's trying to get away from PFPs, it's just that he's doing multiple different angles. He's got a lot of different projects that he's doing always, all the time. And I've been following Mike Miller for about three and a half years in NFTs. And so he's done a number of projects both underneath his name and for other people. People will seek him out and pay him to do their projects, and he'll just be the artist and not much more have control over their projects than that. But then he has his own projects that he's kind of created and done himself. And one of the newest ones that he's trying to do is create a kind of like an online comic book with individual NFTs built around a collection that's tied to a cryptocurrency, and everything kind of blends together. And they're kind of trying to create this. It's like a Keck world that they're creating, and they're kind of in the early stages of it. He's trying to draw a lot of his prior work and NFTs and projects together under one umbrella and help trying to promote everything together. And so it's interesting to see. He hasn't created any of the NFTs yet. None of the individual art panels are made into NFTs yet. He's currently doing the art for the images now.
Lucas, I think there is a way to use some of this underlying technology if it moves in this direction, right? So if you think about how NFTs on something like Chia work, right? You have this concept of rooting a piece of art on the blockchain, and it has a timestamp, and some of those things lend itself towards the ways that things get published now. If you think about when you print the first run of your comic, and it's the number one print run, and you put a tag like that on there, and maybe you make 50 copies, right, of your first print run. Those, if that comic gets really popular, it gets really big, then that 50 can be a really important, really valuable thing, right? Because it was such a limited amount. So I think about, if you create issues of comics and you were to make them digital in that fashion, you could even think of each page being an NFT, and then there's a collection of, whatever it is, 25 pages to the book, and then that easily gets bound up into some digital delivery mechanism that's fairly easy. I think the thing that doesn't lend itself towards comic books or that type of storytelling the way that NFTs are right now is that there isn't this idea that you could bundle all of this stuff into a book and you could just page through it easily. You think about like the interfaces that we have to NFTs right now. It's like a crypto wallet, and I'm browsing through a bunch of stuff. And so, there would be no sense of ordering. There wouldn't be an easy way to have the pages collate together, and there wouldn't be this sense of issuance. And so I think there may yet be a little bit that needs to do on the technology side to make it so that you can do the equivalent of publishing on the blockchain, and whether that even it makes a lot of sense. There's all these ideas about whether we should be putting metadata onto blockchains. This is a big debate in the Bitcoin world right now, saying we shouldn't be clogging up the chain with this kind of stuff. And so maybe it's where we'll start to see special purpose chains that really cater towards this type of stuff, and publishers might use it exclusively because this is what it's geared towards. And so we've had a lot of discussions about, are there special purpose blockchains that sort of have better utility for doing one thing or the other? Maybe it isn't a one chain rules them all, but rather there's the NFT digital publishing chain. And I definitely could see with the technology that's been developed on Chia that if there was a desire to do that, any team could jump right in on what's already been established and take it to the next step. If they wanted to do digital book storytelling publishing on Chia, it could be done because the underlying technology is there. It just hasn't been made accessible to creators. And then on the other side, you've got to make it accessible to the people that want to buy it so that they can have a good experience using it. I've used a variety of different digital comic book readers, and you've at least got to have a way that you can flip through the pages and have a serialized set of things that are presented so the story makes sense. If it's disjointed, it's jarring and it's not really usable.
Yeah, I think we need to see like a wallet concept moving towards Kindle, because I mean, we already have devices that can accomplish this. Like people, I also think about the how much preferable it is to consume information, to consume a story that is vibrant in color, that has all the things that comic books or graphic novels bring to us. I also think about, like, I buy a lot of used books. I buy a lot of used books on various places online. And when when eBay and Amazon first came around, it was like the promise of cheap books, and I used to buy them for sometimes 75 cents a book. Now that has gone away with. Like, for an Ann Hillerman, like some of them might be $5, some of them $45. Hyperion, a first edition hardback of Hyperion I saw the other day was $450.
And that's exactly that concept. It's like you're creating that first run. You have got that serialization. Hey, anyway, so we gotta Spanky get to the show here because he's got some prep he's got to do. So Spanky, last words. You got anything you want to drop for us on things that we can do for anybody that's listening to this that wants to catch up with what you're doing?
Sure. You can follow me on X at DataRed Comics, Instagram the same, and TikTok. SpaceSheriff.com has a lot of stuff. And then Robocatz versus Thunderdogs is now streaming free on the Webtoon app, episode 1. And then episode 2 drops on July 23rd.
Thanks for coming on, Spanky. I wanted to ask about DataRed Comics, but maybe another time.
Another time, for sure.
Okay.
Lucas, I think to finish off that idea that you had, though, just in the last couple of minutes that we've got, I 100% am hearing what you're saying about the price of first editions. And I think that when you think about how artists can get their start, right? I think that NFTs are good for patronage, particularly, right? If you see an artist that you want to succeed, like, what's a way that you can help them succeed? Well, obviously you can just buy their album, or you can buy their piece of art, but how much actually goes back to the artist? Like maybe a small fraction. You buy a book for $20 and a large portion of the $20 of buying the book is in the actual creation of the media itself. So, how much are you really supporting the artist? Maybe a couple bucks. It's like putting $1 or $2 in a tip jar. Versus if you make an NFT and it has, a limited overhead towards making some number of copies of it, then you can say, well, if I buy an NFT from an artist that I really like and I buy it for $50 and then there's a royalty attached to it, that money can almost directly go to the artist. So I look at NFTs as a way that artists could, seek patronage from people who really want to support and see them produce more, whatever they're producing. Because, this was the model that I think has happened throughout history is, great art was produced because there were patrons who wanted to see that art and supported the artists and essentially allowed them to create that art. They didn't have to do it by being commercial. They did it because they created great art and some, fabulously wealthy person could support them in that fashion. And so I think, somebody like Rusty's buddy Shitoshi, who's the Bitcoin billionaire or whatever he is, if he wants to see some artist really take off, like, he could buy up a couple of NFTs and that'd be it. And he could, help support that artist and make sure that they can continue to make what they're making and propagate it.
And he's kind of just to break in on that, Grant, since you were mentioning Shitoshi and buying artwork, he actually did that with Mike Miller's art. Shitoshi went in, and Mike Miller's one of his first collections was called the Funky Monkey Frat House Customs, and that was an actual really in-depth collection of where he did customized pieces of artwork for different people, and got his artist friends involved in doing customized pieces of art also. And those were some expensive NFTs. I remember, I think at the height of his NFTs, he was charging 2 ETH an NFT for some of those NFTs to be done by him. And I think I paid half an ETH for my most expensive NFT. I actually own custom number 5, custom number 40, and I forget the number of my other custom. I bought over 10 of the custom NFTs from that collection. I've been a huge supporter of them. And Chip Toshi actually came in and he swept that collection for about 7 or 8 NFTs. One of them was mine. I had for sale for 1.6 ETH. It was my highest sale of an NFT was actually to Chip Toshi himself. He came through, swept about 7 or 8 of those NFTs because he's creating an NFT collection himself, and he's using Mike Miller as the artist. And one of the perks of those NFTs is if you buy an NFT that's holding another NFT in its hand, he's going to give you that NFT. And so he went out and bought like Other Side Land. He went out and bought Mutant Ape Yacht Club. He went out and bought, Pudgy Penguins. He went out and bought a lot of the major named NFTs, and he put them into his own collection. And if you mint one of those NFTs that's holding the other NFT, he's going to send you that as a free gift for minting that NFT. Now, that collection hasn't come out yet. It's still being created by Mike Miller and Chip Toshi, and it's in the list of things that they're doing. But I just wanted to mention that is something that Chip Toshi actually did. He actually went and swept Mike Miller's collection and did that. Spent probably about 5 or 6 ETH at that one time.
Go ahead, Rusty.
And I was also going to say, I don't know if I can really announce this, but it's kind of been known for a little while now. He also was a private supporter of Mike Miller's custom collection when he was creating the NFTs. And I think he had about 40 or 50 of the NFTs commissioned himself.
So I don't know. To me, there's a huge one of the use cases of blockchain is highest for authors and comic book artists because they have a media that would benefit from an ecosystem being passed around. Rusty, one thing I worry about whenever you're talking about Satoshi and those prices is like there's this concept of the value of it increasing so quickly. To me, like the rarity of an issuance is very important. Like I think about, like, I have an Audible account. I get 2 Audible books a month for several years. As I have so many of those, I would love to be able to sell them off, but they just make another copy of it and sell it to somebody with a subscription service.
Yeah, that's not the model at all, Lucas. I think that's actually what we were trying to say is the other way to do it, right? In that model, when you are creating an audiobook and Audible is distributing it for you, they are creating a walled garden under which you can only experience it through the way that they've got it. And if they decide to rug it, or if they decide that you shouldn't have access to a particular piece of content, you can lose control of it. In the world of self-publishing and blockchain, this is where this could be done substantively different, because you can think of the NFT as the license that allows you to have that media. And so if you're in the world of blockchain where you can self-custody things, then you could actually have real digital ownership of stuff, because you can have real distribution from known creators, and that known distribution and creation of digital assets from creators could be sold, and then you could have a resale market where there are royalties. All of this vision for how this stuff can actually work correctly is completely disjoint from the way that it is done by centralized players, right? So if you have something like Audible, they are controlling the marketplace, they are controlling the ownership, and they are gatekeeping what can be put on that platform, and then taking a substantive slice of how much is earned by the people that are on there. I think famously, what was it? Brandon Sanderson was pushing back heavily against Audible and said, hey, this model for how you guys are doing things, you're taking the lion's share of the money, and you're making it so that essentially the people who create these works can't even live off of what you're leaving. You're leaving them the crumbs. And so he pushed back famously and said, hey, this isn't right the way you're doing this, and you need to change it. And I think he's actually had some success in doing that. So in the decentralized model of how blockchains can work, and digital asset ownership, we could actually see a big shift where you would be able to sell your first edition, whatever version of that audio book to somebody else, and you could make it so that that doesn't necessarily hurt the artist, because you could say anytime there's a secondary transfer, whatever that person is willing to pay, that they get a cut of it, and so that there's no sense that they're locked out of the secondary market. When you have that enforced royalties, which Chia seems to have cracked, then it really does enable this ecosystem. And so I think that that technology that Chia has been able to pioneer, if that comes to the forefront and you start to see some company like Audible start to launch digital asset ownership on Chia or some other blockchain that can do the same kind of thing, I think you could see a real renaissance in publishing. You could see self-publishing take off in a substantive way, because there's no need for the middleman anymore. Anytime you've got a technology that can cut out a middleman, I think you always need to keep a close eye on it, because it's exciting to see when you have that disintermediated e-commerce. That's a powerful thing.
Well, I think in some ways the middleman changes, going back to that concept of a wallet application, something that's going to be presenting it, and that's what we've been missing, because Chia has solved it. There's also, and I just brought forth Audible as the other end of the continuum for, like, we have seen also in the NFT space some of these very limited NFT collections with incredibly high prices, but there should be a gamut that runs in between there of depending on the audience size, like how many of a collection are released, and there can be other variables that are introduced in there. Going back also to what when eBay came around and Amazon with the reselling of used books, we thought they were going to go incredibly cheap, but what we saw instead was publishers beginning to limit the printing of books, and whereas they were continuing to print a lot of titles, they just began to cut that off, because they understood that there was going to be a resale market, and probably put their fingers on some of those warehouses. Anywho, I don't know if you have anything else. We're at the end of the hour. I think I think that comic books and especially audiobooks, because like 3D printers also bring sort of like this concept too of, it would be interesting if there were actual Stephen King's, James Patterson, other syndicated. And I also like to think about the novel Choose Your Own Adventure when it comes to NFTs too. You can do a lot of different concepts like that, metafiction, whenever you have.
Well, I mean, you can do it, but I think there's somewhat of a, let's jam a square peg into a round hole. Like, yes, you could do something like that, but like, why? Like, what do you gain from it, right? Like, for me, when I think about how does this help make it better, right? In the world of digital publishing, when you have the ability to own something in a real way, and you have the ability to self-custody it, transfer it on a secondary market, and enforce royalties, there is no equivalent. So you've done it better. That, I think, is what, as implementers in the world of blockchain, we have to focus on that kind of stuff. Because if you're just saying, well, we could do it here, you've got to ask the question, why would you do it there? Like, are you doing it better? Are you doing it cheaper? What is the end goal for the consumer? Like, what is the benefit to the user, right? Like, you can always do something, again, that's already been done. I mean, a Choose Your Own Adventure book, sure, that was done as books. And then, when we had computers, you had multi-user dungeons, or you had the little command line interface. You're standing in a room and there's a sword in the far corner, like, these are the same kinds of things. And in the computer, the multi-user dungeon, or the little, go forward, pick up sword, that kind of stuff, you had the ability to make it more immersive. You had the ability to make it longer. And like, because if you were to contemplate a book that was that big, the book might be fill up your whole card table, right? I mean, it would be huge and massive, but in the computer, like there's no sense of how big it is, and you can make it as big as you want. So you've got to think like, how do you make it better? How is it being done better on this platform? And so I think that first cut of the world of like, what can we do on blockchains? It is the things that I just articulated, but just like making a, choose your own adventure and like saying, well, let's jam it on the blockchain. I'm not sure that that's added something that wasn't already there, just doing it on the computer. So,
well, I mean, I bring up choose your own adventure because I think that as, I don't know, like postmodern concepts of fiction and also commercialized fiction, it was an improvement of like the serialized story. So instead of having, like a magazine print a chapter of a book every week and that be a way to monetize it, like all of a sudden you have an exponential increase of the different possible storylines, and you're also giving power into the reader to create that and build that story together. So to me, it's just a marketing concept for fiction that or for narratives that is really suited to blockchain. And yet I'm surprised that I have not seen that. Like I've seen several comic book PFP concepts on Solana, and they were thinking of it in terms of like selling a comic book, not in selling pieces of a story and giving people the option to mix and match that story around. So
well, I would love to look at a project that, I mean, maybe I'm missing it, like that's entirely possible. I don't want to take too hard line of a stance saying blockchain adds nothing here. Like maybe it adds something. Like I'm definitely open to it. So maybe you'll have to send me some stuff, and maybe it's worth us covering that, as something else. But yeah, we're definitely at time here. We're a little over, but it was a lot of fun talking about comic books and NFTs. I think NFTs aren't getting talked about as much these days, but this is not over, and I think that there's a broad avenue for innovative things to be done on the blockchain and NFTs. But I think that we got to see the next wave of it, because we can't just keep doing PFPs. That's probably not enough there to really keep people engaged and entertained and sticking with it, and definitely not the crazy prices that we're seeing. I'd be shocked if we ever see these $500,000 PFPs in our lifetimes again. But who knows? Maybe some of these will hold their value in that way. We'll have to see.
Well, that's also, I mean, we should definitely talk about this more, because that's another thing that I haven't seen explored enough. Is I think if somebody were releasing something a lot cheaper and thinking in terms of the volume that they could be generating, instead of even like aiming for $100 or $20 PFP, they could see something like take off. But maybe there's only 5,000 people in the NFT space so far, or the crypto space, and so we needed to see more run to the convention center. But enjoyed it. And Rusty, very, very interesting to hear about your associations with Mike Miller and Doug TenNapel. Kind of a surprise. I knew you had mentioned them several times before, but I didn't realize the depth there. So Grant, have fun at Crypticon and Kansas City, and we'll see you next week.
All right. See you guys.